Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 250 with Phil from Hazmat Scholars. So we also had Phil on episode 222, where we did a little intro to hazardous waste, went over a lot of definitions just to kind of get folks going. And then episode 230, we really focused in on when is a chemical considered a hazardous waste. Um, and I think Phil did a really awesome job of sitting down and doing that because I've heard a lot of different definitions, but it's never been a consistent definition. They've all been pretty darn close. So I always want to hear from somebody that I can say is a expert in it as opposed to me who has to find experts and find people and say, well, now that I've heard it from a couple of different sources, I can say, all right, now it's good. Um, so Phil, I think today, why don't we talk about universal waste? That's something that I think is very overlooked, um, and at times, I think the everyday public just doesn't understand. Well, first off, the definition of that universal waste, and just the let's call it severity of things like the little button type batteries and those kinds of things. And so, and I'm going to do everything I can to not talk much, Phil, and let you just tell us about universal waste.
Well, thank you, David.
Yeah.
Again, thank you for having me back. Did you say episode 250? This is great.
Yep, yep, 250 made
Well,
it.
I'm glad to join you on episode 250. I hope I'm here for your next 250 episodes, and
I'll have you. I'll have you back for 500. Don't worry.
and before then, and then let's hopefully before then too.
Right.
But appreciate that. So I got to start with a little story, and the story is not the one we talked about before we started recording. This is the one that I visited my parents in Florida about 3 weeks ago, and they're considering moving, and so I'm helping them clean out the garage, and they have a variety of hazardous materials in the garage. Well, I'm talking to dad, and dad's so yeah, we got to get rid of this roofing tar. We have some batteries, we have some recycling and things like that. So, all right, great. Solvents, gasoline, your typical stuff you have in the garage. So we go to the dump, and as we're driving over to the dump, which is about 15-minute drive from where my parents live, I said to dad, I said, well, is this county dump? Is it city? And I'm just curious. He's like, oh, it's a county dump. And I said, what do you need to show your credentials? You got to be part of the county. And he's like, son, they know me here. Kind of looked at him like, they know you at the dump, dad. And he's like, don't worry about it. I got this covered. I'm like,
Mhm.
all right. And so I just thought that was funny. So we go in there. Start off, hey, John. My dad's name's John. And I'm like, oh, we do know you. The landfill director knows my father. I'm like, huh? Okay, well, this is interesting. My dad is in with the county landfill folks, and then they start going through the short inventory of the hazardous materials that they have that he has in the back of the truck. And he goes, yeah, I got some recycling, I got some regular rubbish. He goes, I have some batteries, and I have tar. And the lady looks at him. She goes, do you mean a tire? No, he goes, tar. And now we're in
Mhm.
Florida, kind of near Georgia. So, the Southern accent is really playing in this, is exchanging to my father and this landfill employee. And so 3 times it went back and forth, tar, tire, tar, tire. And so finally I had to sit for like roofing tar. Oh, and everyone just starts laughing. So anyway, so we go to the chemical area where we drop stuff off. They had a little lithium battery, some alkaline batteries, which they told me go in the trash. And then I pull out the tar, the roofing tar, not a tire. And the guy's like, I don't want that here. And I looked at him, what do you mean? He's like, we can't treat that. And I never thought of that.
Ah.
Never thought of that. That roofing tar for a household can go in regular trash. I don't know I don't deal with roofing tar, so I can't say how we would manage that. But this is, as you said, universal waste. We deal with as industry and also as households universal wastes that are common to everybody. We all have fluorescent light tubes in our homes, also in the office. We have batteries. in our homes, as well as the office or our industry. Other things that US EPA considers universal are those HID lamps, in addition to those fluorescent light tubes, mercury switches, thermostats. When I was growing up, everything was a mercury thermostat. You twist the little thing in the house and you hear that click, and that was the mercury completing that circuit,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
turning on your furnace or your air conditioning, whatnot. Uh, those have gone away for the most part, but they're still around. Um, I grew up near Chicago, and so in the late '80s into the '90s, the gas companies were doing a big program of replacing all the mercury-containing switches in their gas meters at each house and replacing it with something that didn't have mercury. But mercury switches are another universal waste. We talk about, I said, batteries, lamps, light tubes, electronics in California is a huge one. It's not regulated federally, but I deal with a lot of folks in California, and it's electronics, triple E waste, or e waste as it's known. So those are items that we all have, and it's a subset of RCRA, or Resource Conservation Recovery Act, which covers hazardous waste. And these are, even though common to everybody, also considered hazardous waste, even though it's under a not as restrictive or intense regulatory regime. It doesn't count towards your uh, it doesn't count towards your generator status. So that means if you generate, some amounts, not exorbitant amounts, but if you produce some amounts, it doesn't count against your very small quantity generator status or your small quantity generator status. If you're large quantity, well, you're large quantity and you're fully regulated. So, but
Hmm.
it's just something you don't have to manage quite as tightly, which is always a benefit. Um, but to kind of backdoor into some of these requirements, and Hazmat Scholar, which is the little gig that I do, that you find me on LinkedIn, and I did a 3-part series on Don't Be a Todd. And Todd is a hazardous waste manager that is making mistakes left and right. And one of the 3 areas that I covered was universal waste. I covered hazardous waste containers, and I also covered hazardous waste record keeping. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like
Yeah,
to take your folks through one of those series, or maybe a couple of those
let's
series,
do it.
depending on our
Yeah.
time. And so, the first one we're going to talk about fluorescent light tubes. Now, satellite accumulation areas, which some of your folks might be aware of, must be closed all the time, right? You're going to have your hazardous material that person's working on a lab or the bench, and they throw their little uh, cotton tube or not cotton swab and Q-tip or wipe and put it in a little bucket near them. That's your satellite accumulation.
Mhm.
Well, you can also, your facilities guys are going to have a box for fluorescent light tubes. And back in the day, and even today, fluorescent light tubes do contain mercury. Even the low to no mercury ones there's still a trace of mercury. So that's why they're hazardous. And we need to manage them correctly. But more times than you can count, especially with the fluorescent light tubes, you're finding the box that they are stored in waiting for pickup open. Because you get the facility guy is going around. He's doing hundreds of these things in a week, in a day, sometimes. He has his boxes. He might tape them with, masking tape, sometimes duct tape, sometimes packaging tape, which is, the best to keep those flaps down. But humidity, sun, little extra wind, all of a sudden, those things pop open. And that's considered an open universal waste container. And if you had a regulator walking through, they nicked you. They're going to get you almost every single time. So
Wow.
yeah, fluorescent light tubes, the boxes that, whether it's the big round tubes or the manufacturer's boxes that you can reuse to
Hmm.
collect your
Hmm.
tubes,
Yeah.
keep them closed all the time.
Yeah, we had to go to those round tubes because the guys are handling just, multiple tubes and tubes. And eventually what they would do is put in one that didn't work. And then because of course the tube looks like a tube, so you always had to have like, well, how do you know when it's been spent and it's new? And because they don't walk around and say, I only pull out the burned out ones and I leave them there. Then I'm going to go back and put in only the good ones again. So yeah, it sounds really funny, but when you get hundreds of tubes, the guys are like, I don't know, a tube's a tube, and so
Yes. Yes. Now, thankfully, there's been a lot of transition to LEDs, LED
yeah.
tubes, and I mean, it's an expensive undertaking, but you know, it's well worth it because it's a universal waste. You don't have as much work to do for reporting and whatnot, but it's still a hazardous waste, and you got to keep that box closed and that tube closed. So that's a good reminder. Um, Let me open up my little thing here. Here's the next one. Uh, Improperly labeled or no indication of the type of universal waste, especially with lamps, batteries, or aerosols. Aerosol was another one that I forgot to mention at the top of our show
Mm.
here. Um, yeah, aerosols. Work with your hazardous waste provider when you're dealing with aerosols. Some of them in some states are okay with everything going into one container. Uh, and the question always comes up: do I puncture these aerosol cans or not? The trend seems to be don't. Just put them into a 55-gallon drum or 30-gallon drum, whatever you want to collect those materials in. Um, but some states want you to segregate it a little bit more by
Mm.
adhesives versus you have canned air versus um, paint versus there's a lot of different stuff out there that can come in aerosols. But anyway, the point that I was going to make was you have to label what it is. So you can't have uh, batteries next to your fluorescent light tubes, although those will be in a box, and then your aerosol cans into 55 and no labels. You can't just put in one, two, and three. It has to have prescribed wording. It
Right.
should say universal waste batteries, universal waste uh, lamps or fluorescent light tubes, or universal waste aerosols. Um, and related to that, you can't have your own home cooked abbreviations either. So, BAT for batteries,
Yep.
LIBATs for lithium ion batteries. So, or let's see, what have I seen for some light bulbs? Oh, bulbs, just bulbs.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, Lamps tends to be the preferred word, but the regulation, which if any of your astute listeners are following along, 49 CFR 273-34A and 273-14A. That's where you're gonna read a little bit more about the proper labeling that needs to go on those. So label them. So closed boxes, closed containers, and clearly labeled containers as well. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that's important.
Yeah.
And then yeah, no abbreviations. So the abbreviations, same sections, 273.14, 273.34 under 40 CFR. Uh, yeah, use the words that they say in there. And don't take those shortcuts because that's where the regulator is going to get you.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at that section again. I have a lot of really anal folks I work with, and they'll say things like, "Oh, it's a battery, it's a CR 2032 button style," and they'll go through the whole. And I'm like, "Look, just say it's a battery, put tape on it, of course, all that kind of stuff. Like they'll write a whole book." But now I'm scared that by writing a whole book, they've kind of like created their own labels and all that kind of stuff that and slang.
Right. And they're well intentioned,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right,
w-
exactly.
and that's what's great about working with really, really smart people. You get a lot more information than you need, but sometimes to meet the regulation, you don't have to go in this case, you don't have to
Hmm.
go above and beyond. It's pretty straightforward. Batteries, fluorescent light tubes or lamps, and aerosols. You keep it simple.
Right. So going back on things that are like aerosols, what what would make that a universal waste? Because I want to say that on my shaving cream, it'll say, "Hey, it has compressed gas in it, of course, for squirting out the shaving cream." But then it says, "Give to your local recycling company."
Yeah.
So is it more of the pressure they're after, or is it a gas that's pushing out that pressure? That's the
Probably
wrong word
yes,
I'm saying.
yes, yeah, yeah.
So,
No, I hear what you're saying.
mhm.
So remember that these rules don't necessarily apply to a a household. So you and
Oh,
me are in a
well, that's true.
house,
Right, right, right.
right?
Hmm.
But if you want to be conscientious at your house,
Hmm.
yeah, take it to your to your recycling center and see what they have to say.
Gotcha.
Like like the story I told about my dad,
Hmm.
going to the dump. They might tell you they're not going to take it, just throw it in the regular trash. You just go right over the dumpster and throw it in the trash.
Hmm.
However, once we are businesses, once we are a regulated entity under RECRA, basically anything with pressure is going to uh, be considered hazardous. And then the contents, if it's spray paint, well, that is flammable. Um, or if you're uncertain, just throw it in with a similar type of aerosol that you have.
Hmm. Hmm.
Work with your hazardous waste provider. Say, hey, I'm a little stuck here. This is non-haz at my house. Is it hazardous here?
Right,
Um,
right, right.
and that's where they offer the value. And like get an extra set of eyes on it, and because you're not in it alone, you're paying them a lot of good money, so let them do a little work. They need to be compliant too, you
Right,
know.
right.
So
Exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly.
when it something doesn't fall into that clear, like, okay, yeah, this is definitely spray paint. That's going in with the other spray paint aerosols, and all of a sudden I have the gas to blow off my monitor and my keyboard.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, and start with the SDS, but then you might not have one. So ask your hazardous waste provider, and
Right, 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 right.
it'll work.
Uh-huh.
It'll
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. So not to give you a long, boring story, but when all this first started, it was the old style monitors, and then of course,
Oh
we
yes,
all we would take the monitors and have them staged, and then somebody would come in and we would get questions like, well, how do you go back and box up an old monitor? And luckily, of course, we would just have them staged. People would show up, and then take care of that. We did a really big refresh. I don't even know what year it was, but when you went from the old style to kind of like that flat
CRT.
screen
Hmm.
TV, yeah,
Yep, the
yeah,
CRT to
like
the flat screen. Yep, I
yeah,
remember that
yeah,
too. And
yeah.
there would be cubic yard boxes, Gaylord boxes, whatever you guys called them back in the day,
Hmm.
and they would be in there. And CRTs intact are hazards. They got I can't remember, like, for let's see, in the 80s. I remember I had like a 30-inch TV, my parents did, and a 36-inch TV. And I remember when I got into the hazardous waste industry, I did that, found out that there was pounds of lead or pounds of mercury in each one of those.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
all sorts of heavy metals that, you know, you'd be shocked. But yet, those CRTs still pop up. I still, some sites that I go to, I like CRTs. Oh yeah, we're still finding them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
but that is another category of universal waste
Yeah,
because they were
yeah.
so ubiquitous, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Right, right. And I
Mhm.
do think that it takes time for us humans to get smart about things. We probably were throwing them in the trash, and then at some point we realize that, hey, when you're crushing these things down, like your dad probably has the same dream that I do, is to be the guy who drives that crusher and the loader and the crushing the trash. So I had that dream for a long time, and then they hired some really young guy, and I know I'm never going to have a chance to do it now. So,
Oh, the dream is dashed.
but so it probably took them a while to go back and say, all right, so where's all these, the metals coming from?
Right,
Where are all these other things? And not like you could say it came from this one CRT only, but you kind of look at the totality of all the stuff, and you say, well, we're going to do everything we can to not even have it to not even have it there to be found in the future, too.
right.
So,
The story I told you before we started recording, where I was in Massachusetts and I was driving on a major highway there, and I saw a flash behind a trash compactor. And the next thing I noticed was a flame coming out of the back of that trash compactor.
mhm,
And that was because, as I found out in the news later that day, was because of a lithium ion battery. And you don't think about the hazards that something as small as a button cell could, in the right atmosphere and the right circumstance within a trash compactor, it
mhm,
gets squished, punctured, electrolyte comes out, something heats up,
mhm.
and all of a sudden you have an incident that shuts down a road for half a day. And
Right. And those
because,
things are just everywhere now too,
yes,
So yeah,
yes,
yeah, everywhere. So
very, very much so.
Phil, it looks like we're bumping up on time here. Could you take a
Oh,
couple seconds, let people know how they can find you out there? Because we have a lot more to talk about, but we just never got to it on this episode.
we do. I have like two more things. This just flew by for me. The one final thing I want to say is, remember, storage that doesn't prevent release to environments also a thing that you have to watch out for. Universal waste, batteries, light tubes. Hey, we have them everywhere. Please store them correctly, like your hazardous waste. Don't leave them out on the dock because, hey, they're not hazardous. But I'm Phil at Hazmat Scholar. You can find me on LinkedIn, uh, and follow me. I'm always looking for folks to just interact with and ask me questions. That's just where I thrive, because I love new questions and different ways I haven't thought about things. Hazmat Scholar is currently a free thing on LinkedIn, and so I've told you before, one day in the near future I'm going to start monetizing that thing, but we'll figure that out when it comes to it. But love to have more of your folks following me, and I look forward to just more time with you in the near future. We have hazardous waste containers and hazardous waste record keeping to cover, and how not to be a Todd, and let's do it correctly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Phil. And before that before that we go, when you said that loading dock comment, I had a flashback. I was probably trying to think when I had like my first job at a big box store. And of course, I'm not going to say what big box store it was, but they had me helping them swapping out bulbs and stuff. And
Yeah.
we took that out there to the dock and we acted like we had like spears and we threw them into the dumpster kind of far, like we wanted to see like who could get like close enough to that can. So we threw it like, all kinds of stuff. And, I think I was probably 16. I don't even think I was even 17 yet, but I had no clue. It never dawned on me because we just threw things out in the trash.
Well,
Well,
I did the same thing, but I played swords, and we tried to, hit it
we
as
never
hard as we
did
could.
that, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then the next thing I remember is that kind of powdery taste in the back of your mouth. Did you ever? And I'm
Yes.
like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be breathing that, but who knows how many brain cells I lost during that time frame.
Exactly. Exactly. But as soon as you said that, that little flashback came back, I was like, oh man, I did a lot of things wrong. And I was just so young, and I probably didn't have the maturity that if somebody said, I need you to take it serious, of course, too, you know.
Oh, right.
So yeah, it's really, really hard. So, Phil, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening today. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Thank you and have a safe day.
Bye, guys.